It's it's really time for the visit with the person of high strangeness. I had an echo here. Actually, these are times of echoes, and we're going to discuss some of these with you today. The name of the show is called All Is Well, and before the show is over, we'll find out just how well and by whose definition. Now, before we go on to this, I'm taking you from this dramatic opening shot we had to something that is dear to my heart, and which is the crop circles now. On August the 4th, 2003, a crop circle came in, and let me hold it up for you. It came in on August the 4th. It's at Adams Grove in Alton Barnes, Wiltshire. I can't even say that. And this is what it looked like again. And they are actually, they look like peace doves. And I'm kind of glad it came in like that, because maybe we can, maybe that makes us think, because we really do need peace on earth right about now. And so I haven't said all this. To remind you, all crop circles can be accessed to my webpage. And so I'm going to introduce you to my guest. And my guest today is David Montgomery. And I'm so glad you came. Thank you.
Nice to be here, Lillian.
You came a long ways, didn't you?
Yeah, down from north of Seattle and Salton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of traffic?
No, it was a pretty good commute, and it was a nice day to drive down
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're really happy that you came to visit with us. Now, we got the opening shot behind us again, and that photograph is part of your book. Now, I'm not going to talk about the book right now. I just want to talk about that photograph for a minute.
Right.
What made you put that in your book? It's actually on the back of it now.
Yes, it's a photograph of the United States Marines training some foreign forces. They're from Moldavia, in how to disarm a civilian. And it's an indication of a lot of training that's taking place in the U.S. military with U.S. foreign forces that resemble martial law. And so this is one of the martial law techniques of disarming a civilian and so on.
Right.
There are a number of different things that these foreign militaries are trained in that strongly resemble martial law.
Martial law, yeah.
Right.
Now, you gave me your bio, and let's see if I can find it here. Let's see, maybe you can help me refresh my memory. Here you are. You are a test engineer at Boeing's?
That's right.
And you have a Bachelor of Science in Physics?
That's right.
Cool. And you have also worked on testing of submarines launched ballistic missiles?
Right, submarine launched ballistic missiles. That's those missiles you see that fire out of the submarines.
Out of the submarines?
Yeah.
Luckily, we live in the age of television, so we can actually visualize what people tell us, you know? Yeah. And then you worked on the B-2 stealth bomber and F-22 jet fighters.
That's right.
And now I found this interesting here. It says that you was an electronic intelligence specialist for the Air Force.
That's right, for 4 years, back in 70 to 74. So the Cold War is still going on at that time.
It says that you served as executive director for numerous nonprofits.
Right.
So I guess my question would be, David Montgomery, the man, how did you get from here to here?
Well, my political activism, I guess, started in California. We had to do with the housing project, and they were going to rezone some property, and I worked on that for the summer and got it successfully downzoned from high density. And from that, I had worked been in the military, and there was a proposal that came up that was supported by the Soviet Union back in the early 80s called a nuclear freeze proposal. And that proposal would have frozen the strategic military forces of both sides in that configuration at that time. But the Soviets had gone through a large buildup of their military, and during the Carter administration, we had reduced ours, and so there started to be an advantage to the Soviet side to freezing them into a position of superiority. So I became involved in trying to oppose that idea so that we could achieve a balance. And when Ronald Reagan was elected, that was one of his objectives, is to restore the balance of power between Russia and the United States.
Yeah, right. Well, that would have been my next question here.
Yeah.
Because I've read most part of your books, most all of it. What happens is it didn't start with the Clintons. That's why I'm going with this. It was just set up from way back when. Would you happen to know how far back?
Well, as far
put
as
all this in place here.
well, the proposal for the world government, it goes back to Adam Weishaupt. I believe I pronounced it right, but he lived in Bavaria, and that was back around the founding of our country when George Washington was here, and he set up he had joined the Masonic Order and set up a special division of that called the Illuminati for the purpose of infiltrating the different governments of Western Europe and the United States to create a world government. The European governments discovered that, and he fled to Switzerland. But later on, he got backing from a banking family called the Rothschilds and so on. And this movement has continued up until today, and so it's been going on for nearly 200 years.
Yeah, so all is well, would you say?
Yeah, yes. Well, they're very close to achieving the goal today after this 200-year struggle. Yes.
Yeah, and so you was nice enough to give me a bunch of questions here that I couldn't pull out the computer because we all had a worm, as you know. The date of the taping is we are in August the 13th, I believe. So we had just got attacked by a worm.
Right.
Yeah. And you had given me a bunch of questions here, so I went through them, and it mentions here that the book is about the new powers of the United Nations.
That's right.
So take me from your explanation here to the United Nations. How did this whole thing get wiggled in there some kind of way?
Yeah. Well, it has been a long process, but one of the things that affects us a lot is a series of treaties that dealt with disarmament that made the United States weaker and weaker and weaker. And that has been going on for a while. But the actual proposal to create, the people backing the idea of the world government decided to use the United Nations as the vehicle. And so around 95, there was a meeting to come up with the detailed plans of how to change the United Nations into a structure that could operate as a government.
Right.
And so since 95, we've seen a series of changes, and one of the final approval for this change came from all the leaders of the world in a meeting in September 6th, 7th, and 8th of the year 2000 at the United Nations headquarters in New York. That meeting was called the Millennium Assembly.
That's right.
And
now, let me ask you now, there's a lot of people praying for world peace.
Sure.
That's why I showed the dove there in the beginning. So when we're talking about globalization and global government, a lot of the people think that means that we're all going to be in agreement with one another. Would you like to go there for a minute?
Yes, the type of government they're proposing is more dictatorial. It's a socialist, more in line with what you saw in the old Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And in fact, there have been some KGB officers that have defected, and they believe that if there is a world government established, it will be along the model of the Soviet Union, and they will follow the same pattern that the Soviet Union did in persecuting and executing individuals that might oppose them. And he believes that that these executions could be on a large scale of millions and millions of people.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, this is a little heavy in my lap, so I was going to save it for later. But just to remind you, I've shown you this before. This here is the Homeland Security Bill. It is 483 pages. They were given a night or less to read the whole thing and then vote on it. Of course, this is the result of it, and it almost goes in hand what we're talking about.
Right.
So I'm going to put it down because it is really heavy. And
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of this important legislation is very large, and Congress doesn't have a time or opportunity to review it.
yeah.
And so a lot of things slip into our laws
It did.
that are not friendly to our rights.
Yeah. And so let's go back down over here. And then the United Nations actually got the powers by.
Well, there is, to really change the United Nations, the proper way is to amend the charter. It's just like their constitution. We have a constitution, they have a charter. And they have an amendment process. And the correct amendment process is to get the vote of support of 2/3 of the members, and also the backing of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, which is the United States, Britain, France, and China and Russia. But the United States has to vote for the change of the charter, and at that time it would be like a treaty that would be ratified in the Senate. And there was a senator there, Jesse Helms, which was opposed to this, and so they didn't have a method of changing the charter. So they came up with a workaround method, and that is to create a series of international treaties that all these countries would sign up to, and that the International Criminal Court would interpret.
Do you need some water?
What's that?
Do you need water?
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a little bit. Let's see, if we're going to materialize some water. Can somebody get some water for Mr. Montgomery, please? That's not on your paper here, but where we're trying to take care of this. Now tell me, so if we are all part of this treaty that we have with the United Nations, how do you think we could have made our own rules when it came to the Iraq War?
Well, the United Nations preferred that we go through their approval, and this would reinforce their role in determining whether there would be a war in Iraq or not. And Bush decided not to go down that path.
Go that route, yeah.
Which, from the standpoint of us being independent of the UN, that's all right. But there are other implications about why we might have gone into Iraq. So it's, for instance, it takes, it further reduces the amount of military forces that are available to defend the United States. That's a problem, I think, and it also overextends, that is, these forces that they're being asked to spend a lot of time away from their families. This affects whether people re-enlist or not, so it affects the quality of our military. Also, we're using equipment all the time, and they wear out, and that affects our ability to be capable of defending our country. So there's other issues involved.
Other issues, yeah, but I was just on the road for a while, and we drove all back roads. And one of the things that people were wondering about, and we're going to go through the International Court here in a minute, one of the things that people were wondering about, if we're trying to go towards, like it appears, to globalization and this new world government, as one of the main participants, how come we can, on the other hand, we can still make our own rules, and that, especially the people in the Crawford, Texas area, couldn't quite comprehend that. I was in that area.
Well, I think that is the central question for the future of the United States and the UN is how long or are we going to cooperate with the UN in the future?
Yeah.
And I think, just the basic idea of taking orders from the UN is opposed by most Americans. And that is what I think is going to come down to be what will generate a crisis between the United Nations and the United States. Yeah, between those. So.
But then at the same token, we are transferring domestic powers. So you see sort of
Yes. Whenever we sign a treaty that has to do with a domestic issue, we're transferring that control of a domestic issue to the UN. because they set up a committee to administer the treaty. And then that committee that has members from many different nations. And then that committee makes decisions on that treaty. And they expect compliance from the nations that signed it. So if we signed it, they expect compliance. So you have like another legislative body.
Another whole layer there, yeah.
Right, on the international level, is making domestic policy for us. Originally, treaties were supposed to be for areas in which you needed treaties. They were outside domestic issues, that is, trade, or maybe settling a war, or territorial dispute, or border, or those issues. And we use them for allocating radio frequencies between nations, the use of the Antarctic.
HARP.
Yeah.
HARP, yeah, we all know what HARP is.
Right, and the free access to the oceans and to outer space and to the moon and things like that. You don't want anyone, these are not domestic policies, these are things that have to be coordinated between nations. But I don't think it's proper to put a domestic policy into a treaty, because then all you're doing is taking that control from the citizens to this international level.
Right, so that was the next thing now. That is some kind of way spilling over with some of the new laws that we have, the Patriot Act and things.
Right.
So that is going to affect most of the citizens.
Yes.
And one of the things we found, by conversations is we always think, oh, it's over there, it's over there. Well, where's over there?
Yeah.
Because it's sort of in our backyard right now.
Well, I think this terrorism issue is kind of a red herring.
It is.
That is the approach they're taking to the problem is, I think, not proper. Before, when the U.S. government at the height of the Cold War was fighting communism and was worried about Soviet agents, doing espionage and sabotage in our country, the FBI could keep track of a lot of these agents, and they, in fact, asked Congress to set up internment camps for them. But they never set up a surveillance system, for the general public.
Yeah, you had a whole list here how it, how it spills over in everyday life for us. And but I must tell you, when you're in the middle of nowhere with a cell phone, like we got stuck in the mountains outside of White Sands, and they say, "Where are you?" and you don't know, that little device comes in real handy, because they can actually find you,
Yes, but the thing is, they can know where you're at, but the phone doesn't tell you where you're at.
Yeah, I didn't know where I was, but they did, so. Yeah.
Right, so they're allowed to know where you're at, but you're not allowed to know. And I think if the information's there, you should control it. So. And
then we're talking about hooking the spook lights up to the satellites so we can locate them, and I think that's why people are so. But they don't object as much as they should. It's presented as a convenience more than.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things like OnStar, which is the.
Right, the OnStar, yeah, that's what I was talking about.
It's a GPS, on your car, and they can tell you where you're at. Yeah. But.
Yeah, let me hold that up here for a minute. So we got a whole list of things here.
Yeah.
One is OnStar.
OnStar, right, and then your phones have GPS, some of those, and the Patriot Act has access to your library records, medical records, what you purchase, air travel, public video, the internet, what you do on the internet, your finances, and even physical access to your home.
Yeah.
They can come break into your home and not tell you that they've done that to your home.
Yeah.
But some of these things are commercial services that you pay for, like OnStar and the GPS on your phone, but they have access to that information. So I think if the tracking of your car had been originally a government program, you would object to it. But
yeah, but it came in real handy when we didn't know where we were. So that's what I was trying to say here. It's just sort of now, when we talked earlier, you told me an interesting piece that came, it was a newsletter at Boeing's, and I found that really interesting.
Yeah, well, I was very surprised and concerned, I guess, about this development is that at Boeing has announced that they have an agreement with a Russian company to help provide, well, technical help for their missile defense system in the area of radars. The bad thing about that is that Boeing builds the missiles that are going to be shot down by that system. And Boeing has to, on contract to the U.S. government, develop methods for penetrating their radar system.
If you give me that for a minute.
just,
Show the publication here. So.
And the
Just
article's on the
Boeing
second
news
page.
for that.
But the it's on the second page. Or
On the second page?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
hang
it's
on,
the article.
I'll do the second page. I was
Yeah.
just going to show. Oops. It's going to show where it came out of. Here you go.
So yeah, Boeing and RTI Systems of Russia announced agreement. And so I think it's a fundamental conflict of interest that the company that provides security for the United States by building the missiles that attack the Russia or the old Soviet Union would also have a contract to defend against those same missiles.
The same missiles,
and
yeah.
so they're on both sides of the issue.
Yeah, so do you think that that the U.S. is cooperating with the new U.S. police force there?
Well, yes. There's three new powers of the UN that are security related. The International Criminal Court, the new police force, and the new military. And we are cooperating with the police force, part of it, and they're using the intelligence services of different nations. So from our side, we're providing support from the CIA and the FBI. And British intelligence is cooperating, German intelligence and French, and also the Russians are cooperating. So the FBI has opened an office in Moscow. So, for instance, to do this, their job, this new police force, is to fight terrorism, drug trafficking, and organized crime. And so I guess because of those issues are important to us, that we're cooperating with them. But it can lead to, I think, a conflict over our Constitution by enforcing international laws on individuals in the United States. And whether the Constitution or international law will take jurisdiction is a question. So.
Yeah, I want to go back to what we talked about earlier. So you started out with from housing, and that took you to all of that. So what did I miss here? My goodness, I know that when we're interested in something, it's a never-ending story.
Right.
But what a journey you had here.
Yeah, I'd always been interested in international issues and security issues, and the nuclear freeze issue provided that opportunity to move into that area. And I've kind of continued in that area. I've worked with many different groups that have come from communist countries, from Poland and Central America, Africa, and Russia too, as well, and Eastern Europe, the different Eastern European countries, and Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos.
Yeah, in your book, you made mention of especially Hillary Clinton, where she was, and I want to say this is not a political show, this is history. I mean, this has already happened, so, where she actually represented the African National Congress at one time?
She was on a board.
On the board.
Yeah, I think it was a organization that gave money to Communist Front organizations overseas, most of them with the Palestinian issue, and they may have given some money to the African National Congress as well. And so they were pretty radical organizations. She had previously, worked for two lawyers that had been members of the Communist Party and worked with the Black Panthers.
The Black Panthers, yeah. Now that was of interest to a lot of us because when some things came to the forefront, Maxine Waters from California ordered an investigation, and a whole lot of things came to light then. Now, in my thought at the time was, you know, when I reviewed that in my own mind, sometimes we become really involved in causes that we think is really worthwhile, and then it's all about the word. The word changes from one to the other, and then all of a sudden that's being held against us. How is that, you think?
How deep her involvement was in this type of issues, yeah.
At the time, I'm sure she must have thought it was a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I think she still thinks the same way. She had worked with some activists that were promoting an violent overthrow of our government, and they wanted to train her to do that. But she told them that she wasn't going to go with a violent overthrow of the U.S. government, that she wanted to work with infiltrating the U.S. government and changing it from within.
From within.
So, I mean, she had an understanding of this more radical goal and how to achieve it, and she picked that path. And I think she's sticking to that today. And it's a conscious choice. I think she has more of an understanding than a lot of the students who are demonstrating during the Vietnam War, you know. She has more of an understanding what really is going on.
Yeah. Well, we did a show on about some of the local issues and demonstrations and protests, and the way Glenn Anderson defined protest was to speak up for something that you were for, rather than take and protest and make it a real negative word, which it really isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I got involved with a lot of political activism too, you know, in doing what I call counter demonstrations, or you know, to other against the freeze. They have a demonstration for the freeze. I would organize my people to support our defense policies and not disarm and so on. So, and there wasn't very many people at the time I was doing that during the 80s. It was kind of unusual for someone to come out in support of U.S. policy. But
in the 80s, yeah. I would think so. Now, one of the things on my paper here says, which nations are donating forces to the UN?
Yes, well, right now, the Russians have donated 1/10 of their army, and NATO has donated 1/10 of their forces, and New Zealand has donated all of its military to the UN.
All of it?
All of it, except for they left them a few coastal ships for controlling the borders, but all the rest went to the UN. And then there was 3 republics in the southern part of the old Soviet Union in which they combined all of their militaries and donated all of the militaries to the UN. But I think today there's a list of some 41 countries that have donated some or all of their forces to the UN.
When I was on the road, we were in I think it was South Dakota, and the bombers were just coming back from Iraq, and one of the soldiers told us that I was complaining about it was too windy and I couldn't get on the freeway properly, and, you know, stuff like that. And he had a truck and crow, and so we got real relaxed there for a minute. And he told us that a lot of isn't that which one is the bombers that just came from Iraq? B-52s, no?
Well, I think they might, yeah, B-52s.
They allowed.
And the B-1s, too.
They allowed. I do know that. And he said that they was all getting ready to be pulled out and stationed in Slovakia and Hungary, and I found that really interesting.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's a number of things I think that are happening that are kind of alarming, and one is that we had built the B-52 to carry atomic weapons and nuclear weapons, and then we had supposedly a replacement of the B-1, but we didn't build very many of them, so we kept the old B-52s, and then the B-1 carried the nuclear weapons, and then we shifted the conventional bombing to the B-52s. And then we were supposed to build the B-2 in large numbers and retire the B-52s. Well, now all 3 bombers have been transformed into conventional bombing, and they have dropped their roles of dropping nuclear weapons. And so we have disarmed the air part of our military force that deals with nuclear weapons. We had three parts to or three delivery systems for nuclear weapons: the bombers, submarines, and then we had land-based missiles. And the land-based missiles is what Boeing makes.
Yeah.
The sea-based missiles are Lockheed. I worked on those. And I've also worked on the B-2, which is a stealth bomber. But I think that the disturbing trend is that we no longer have the capability of dropping a nuclear weapon from a bomber, and yet the Soviet or Russia today has a lot of nuclear weapons, and the type that is used on the battlefield, they have an enormous advantage over the United States. They have over 20,000 what they call tactical nuclear weapons to be used on the battlefield, and the United States has less than 1,500.
1,500, yeah. So what do you say to the average American that is concerned about national defense?
Right. Well, something is national defense that provides our security.
Right.
If we can't control our security, other nations will dominate us, and they will control all the other policies of our nation. It's the only way we can maintain control of our own government and be self-governing is to have a military that protects our nation from influence of other nations. And so defense policy is very important. Today is only like 15% of the budget. It's very small. And I think it's something that we should pay attention to, that we could get to the point where the United States or our military does not have the capability of defending against attack against Russia and China. And Russia and China have a new military alliance, which is against the United States. It's called the multipolar world. And that's another concern of mine, is that the U.S. government is not reacting properly to this new alliance, military alliance against the United States. And it includes Russia, China, India, Iran, and Belarus.
So let's take that and make it a local here for a minute, okay? Now, in the Seattle area, we watch local news, you know. There's so many problems with the police department at this time. They are either on administrative leave, or they have, mainly because they have killed somebody in chases and things like that. Our area is a war zone. Just go to the local channels. This is a war zone now. I would think sooner or later they're going to run out of police force to replace the people that they have either put in jail or put on leave, anything like that. How are we going to arrive at that, or would the National Guard have to take care of us here shortly?
If things get out of control.
Well, yeah, we are. You turn on the TV, you know, we are in a war zone.
Right. Well, I don't think that the crime rate as such will trigger martial law, but under the Clinton administration, they had 4 issues. I think, you know, they had nuclear, chemical, biological, and also computer attack as triggers for martial law. And I think a terrorist attack, we could see another terrorist attack, which could be like chemical or biological. And also, one thing to point out about terrorism is that the terrorist organizations do not have the power to overcome the military of the United States and to impose their will on the United States. They do have power to generate fear, and that's why they're called terrorists. But yet, we are responding in such a way that we're increasing surveillance of the population, and we're taking actions that I think are beyond, or kind of in the realm of where there's a large physical danger to the nations. But the terrorists cannot present a large physical danger to our nation. They can kill hundreds of people or thousands of people, but they cannot destroy our military. They cannot destroy our government. They cannot impose their will on us. Where it's degenerating is the war on terrorism. And in the case of the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security, we're seeing our own government depriving us of some of our rights in order to conduct this war. And like I say, we have conducted successfully efforts against the intelligence agents of the old Soviet Union without having to go to this massive surveillance technique. And so I think there's an alternative motive to to what we're doing right now.
I just met you today. So do you
Yeah.
have children?
I have 3 daughters.
3 daughters. What do you tell them when they ask you that, should I have 10 children or 2 children or none?
Well, they haven't asked me. They listen to
Oh.
what I have to say, but my wife didn't want them to get too heavily involved with the politics of it, because it tends to be kind of negative, you know. So we wanted to continue to live their normal life, and but I think they are also aware of some of these problems, but they don't want to dwell on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing with a lot of people. We're just so busy otherwise that it's the very people that even make connections here. So, but supposing they would ask you, what would you tell them?
Well, I think there's an opportunity to still try. I think we should try to live a normal life. That should be our goal, you know, to live a normal life and to resist being forced into anything less, you know, with less rights or less security. I think, and as time goes on, we should we'll have to devote more effort to trying to maintain our rights and our freedoms and the laws as we know them.
Define the word resist,
Oh, resist.
if you can.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a stickler about words
Yes.
because being a foreigner myself, sometimes what I mean it's not.
Well, I
really-
mean, we have an obligation to
Obligation.
make an effort
Yeah.
to, you know, to be involved with the political system and take part in it. And I think if you see things going in the wrong way, you should have an obligation to try to correct it and make it go the right way
That's fine.
for you and your family and the rest of the community. And I think there are a lot of things that are going the wrong way, and so that's when we make these efforts, they could be defined as resistance.
Resist, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because being a citizen carries responsibilities. I mean, we didn't get where we are now
Right.
by not doing anything.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah, and then we had touched on the economy. See, that's another reason you ask people, you know, why do you feel like that? And most people actually care about their job, which is mostly gone now.
right.
Security within their own perimeters, in their house and maybe their yard,
Right.
and everything beyond that is just.
Right. Well, yes, life has become more difficult financially for a lot of families, and so then the wife has had to work, and we're more occupied with just supporting ourselves, and it makes it more difficult to take time to be involved with the political process. But we need to do that despite that, but one of the reason why all these financial problems are occurring is because of this movement towards globalization. That is where you move jobs, the corporations and the companies take the jobs here and move them overseas because supposedly labor is cheaper. And then, of course, these are usually higher paying jobs, and so then you go to lower paying jobs, and so the stress gets higher. But in long term, this is very short-sighted for these companies to do this, because they say, well, they could go and make it cheaper, and then they'll come back here and sell it to you. Well, you are now out of work, so you cannot afford to buy their products, even if it is manufactured in China or Mexico or somewhere. And so this, in the long term, is going to be an economic disaster if we continue this. We cannot continue to export all the work and the manufacturing overseas. And for a long time, we were told that you know, when the steel industry was hurt and our heavy manufacturing was being reduced and exported overseas, that we're going to move to the information age, right? And we're going to be all working in the computer industry. We'll be making computers and we'll be programming the computers.
That's where we went.
Well, today, all the integrated circuits that are inside those computers are all made overseas. There's none made in the United States. And now, the companies that do the programming, like Microsoft, Boeing, and others, have all decided to export their software work as well. And so we were misled that, you know, we were going to rely on the information age as the basis of our future economy. Well, that's being pulled out from underneath us right now.
Yeah. Now, No, I'm going to show you some euro money. You call it euro, but the proper pronunciation is euro. One is a 10 and one is a 5. Now, I understand that, if I can get a close-up of that here for a minute, when that money went into effect, it was supposed to ease people's burdens and make things easier. And I don't remember how long. This is what it looks like from the front. Then I'll turn it over for you. And, you know, it would keep down the costs on things. Well, in reality, I'm going to turn it on. In reality, what happens is the wages remained the way they were. And so now this money here is like $1. So the people didn't benefit at all because they, in reality, they're paying twice as much for anything because their wages stayed the same, but they're not paying by euro, you see.
Oh, okay.
So where am I going with that? I was going to hook that into with exporting things to other countries because their currency is different.
Right.
And that's what makes it so cheap.
Yes, that's part of it. And there is one thing that I have a concern about the current mortgage market. Most of the money in the United States is generated through loans. And when a bank gives a loan, it actually creates that money, is allowed to create that money by the Fed. And so every loan creates more money. And as more money is created, we have a lot of loans going on right now because of the low interest rates, that means the money supply is increasing. And if the money supply increases faster than the goods and services that it purchases, that means the U.S. dollar will start to lose its value, and so it'll take more dollars to buy things. And that means that the U.S. dollar will be worth less than the euro.
Just like that. And money is power, what you say.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you see, well, what do you see had, we were talking about short-term things, how short-sighted that was. We were talking to some of the, on some of the shows, if you remember, we were talking to Ivan, the intelligence officer from Russia, and he explained that we do everything short-term.
Right.
And that the Soviet Union and these other powers, they put everything in place like long-term, like 50, 60 years in advance,
Right.
even though they know they cannot reap the benefits right now.
That's right.
And so,
in fact, I ran across that with my research. I found out there was a major general in the Czechoslovakian Republic who was given access in the early 60s to top-secret Soviet plans for conquering the world. And it was like a 20 or 30-year plan, you know. And he said that the chief problem here in the United States is that people don't believe that another country would plan that far in advance.
yeah, but
And
they do.
yes, but yeah, it's exactly right. And they had detailed plans for Western Europe, for the United States and Canada. But I think they had their plan at the time, you know, for conquering the planet rested, I think, on 3 issues. One was destroying the military alliances of the United States, NATO, and other alliances. Gaining control of the raw materials that the West depends on the United States, like oil, minerals. And the third was gaining access to our technology. And when they gained access to our technology and money, and which happened when the Soviet Union collapsed, they were going to restart the arms race, in which they believed the United States would not be able to keep up with it. And I'm concerned that this may be materializing because a lot of the companies that make military equipment are reducing or getting rid of the materials and the factories and the plants they use to make military equipment. And so it will be harder for the United States to respond to a threat. And so we're moving towards that goal.
Now, you working at Boeing's, let me see here. Now, a lot of people have lost their job, and we've seen this before. I think you said it was in the 70s, and I
Right.
remember that.
Right.
Now, by the military contracts that they are now, you know, trying to get, do you think is this region going to recover, you think?
Well, I mean, the military is kind of mixed. In the commercial, of course, they're
Yeah.
exporting the work, but the military, Boeing has a contract for building unmanned aircraft, and Boeing is trying to make a contract with Israel to, excuse me, to manufacture those. So that would be, they're starting to export even military work. So.
Yeah, well, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, the name of the book is The New World Government Exposed, and I found it really, really interesting. And so, name of the show is All Is Well, and when we started out, we were talking about 200 years ago how they was trying to maneuver things a certain way. We were maneuvering pretty good, would you say?
Yeah, so we're pretty close to the goal now.
Yeah. And anyway, I'm going to put this down here. Let's see, what's on my list that I haven't? I think we covered most of that. So let me give you a free hand here for the time that we have left. What is it that we left out that you feel is all important? It's all important, but
yes. Well, I think the most important thing is to recognize, excuse me, this new threat, but there.
We had talked about bases. We had talked about. I saw you had some. Let's see, I can't remember, but it took us to uranium. That most of the uranium came to
Right.
Hanford, and then.
Oh yes, as part of this disarmament process, we've signed many treaties to disarm, and some of those, of course, are requiring us to dismantle strategic nuclear weapons, and as we dismantle them into pieces, they're not being destroyed at the moment, but they're being stored as parts. And a lot of these parts, plutonium in particular, is being moved to Hanford. And the Clinton administration allowed the UN to come in and monitor this.
That's what it was.
Parts. Yeah, and so once a month, a UN inspector shows up at Hanford to verify that we have not reassembled these parts.
Right.
And I've also heard reports from Rocky Flats that the UN inspectors take the attitude that they actually own the parts, but I don't think I don't find any policy to back it up.
Back it up, yeah. Yeah,
yeah. But this is a concern, having the UN in our nuclear weapons plants. Clinton did this under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was to prevent third world countries from becoming nuclear powers by inspecting their nuclear power plants. And Nixon, who signed this treaty, was willing to let the UN into our nuclear power plants, but not into our nuclear weapons plants. But Clinton, when he came in, reinterpreted the treaty and then allowed the UN in. And so I think that's a concern. A lot of think tanks that support the idea of a creation of a UN military would like the UN military to have nuclear weapons, and they would like to use U.S. Nuclear weapons plants and to build UN nuclear weapons. And this is a step towards that, where they're in our nuclear weapons plants, they're now inspecting the parts and stuff, and they'd like to move towards ownership of this, and that's not a good way. We obviously, if we lose control of our military and our nuclear weapons, we lose control of the country.
Yeah. FEMA.
FEMA was set up in the 70s as an emergency government for nuclear war, and then but it's also taken on this emergency, preparedness and reaction to emergencies.
Yeah, and we had a lot of dealings with them in this area.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, in case of martial law or a war, they're the emergency government, and so that's why a lot of people are concerned about FEMA, especially in regards to martial law. If we approach martial law. Oh, one other thing about the Clinton administration is, in regards to martial law, is that he had trained a lot of these foreign forces under a program called Partnership for Peace. It was a NATO, Eastern European, Russian countries doing this training, which was had, as we saw in that first photograph there, was a lot of martial law types of things. And while he was training them, those military forces to do those tasks, he also had FEMA sign an agreement with the same nations that were being trained in these tasks to provide assistance to individual states in case of an emergency here, like martial law. And so there was, if I can find it here, there's a
They were
an
biological,
agreement.
yeah, they were nature treaties signed saying that, you know, if you have a bird or something that's extinct, it has precedence over, over the people. So a lot of things were signed during the
Right,
Clinton administration.
right.
Yeah, that people aren't aware of. Can we find it?
Maybe
not?
it's in my
Okay.
other folder here, but
Well, you know, we have Mars next to the moon, and we have Pluto went right by the moon, and we have worms, and so things are just not organized. Have you noticed?
well, I think things unfortunately are going to get more chaotic,
Yeah.
and then less, and so that's why I think we're going to have to become more involved with the political process. As long as we have the political process available to us, martial law, as you know, suspends the Constitution, does not allow you to participate in the political process, and could lead to the confiscation of weapons because the Second Amendment would not apply under martial law. And so there, I think it's going to be a dynamic time, and to get more dynamic as we go along.
Yeah, so we sound like doomsday people. We're not. We educate us, I would think. Yeah, let's put a category on what we're doing here, and then we're almost done here.
Okay.
What category did this conversation come into, what do you think?
Well, it's politics, and it's history, and you know, and it's also about that aspect of politics, which is about your rights, our sovereignty, and so it touches a lot of things, areas. Actually, you know, this whole issue from another level, you know, is basically something that's been continuing from the beginning of time between good and evil, and there's always been a conflict between good and evil, and unfortunately you can't take a rest from that conflict. It's always been there, but it's just coming to a culmination now, a crisis, as it has us periodically through history. And we're reaching that point again in history. In history,
and so it's good to be educated. And so your book is wonderful, and we have another one down here. It's called Pandora's Box. They're no longer in print, so it takes Pandora's Box is no longer in print. David Montgomery's book is everywhere, in bookstores, on the web.
That's right.
And so it made for easy reading. There were so many references, 400 and some, I think.
Right.
It made for easy reading, and was well cross-referenced. So what's next for you on a personal? We have 1 minute, and then we're going to wind up here.
I might look into putting some of this information on video in the future sometime, or writing some other books as well. So, and so we'll. At the moment, I'd like to get the word out on the book, this book.
It's actually been around a couple of years now, no?
Yes.
Yeah, but we're just now hearing about it. So if you have people out there that have things to say, you need to call us. And so I'm really thank you for having taken the time. It was rather interesting being all over the planet to see just how well, we are. And so you've been delightful. And next week, where we go next week? Next week we go into castles. We have a new reporter in Europe. So next week we're going to take you to castles and rivers in the ocean. And I think I'm at the end, so I'm going to thank you very much for coming. Your hands are cold.
Yeah.
Are you cold? Yeah.
That's
so
right.
we'll probably see you next week and give our regards to your lovely wife. And
Okay.
we see you next week.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.